We need to talk about Joe Biden. The New York Times has begun to talk about Joe Biden. You will recall, I was told credibly, in fact, Charlie and Philip were both with me. We were in Washington, D.C. last October, beginning of October. Went up there, did some media interviews and the like, and we were told at the time by multiple reporters from multiple outlets that the word on the street was the New York Times was, after the election, everyone expected it to be a disaster for the Democrats. They were going to start pounding Joe Biden, trying to push him out of the race. And it didn't happen. The election went well for the Democrats. The stories have always been there, though, and we're now starting to get a slow trickle as more and more polling shows actually that Joe Biden does not have strong polling across the nation. It's not good. I mean, I'm just looking right now. You've got nationally, Robert Kennedy Jr. is at 17% of the Real Clear Politics polling average. You got Marianne Williamson at 7%. That's bad for an incumbent president who only right now has 60% of his party support. That's really bad. In the general election, Ron DeSantis beats Joe Biden pretty decisively. In fact, when you look at the popularity right now of these candidates, it actually looks good for a DeSantis situation versus Joe Biden. Trump and Biden are tied roughly, and DeSantis is slightly ahead by 1.5 points. If it were Trump versus Harris, Donald Trump would win by 6 points right now. The Democrats know they have problems, and thus we get to the New York Times over the weekend, inside the complicated reality of being America's oldest president. The subtitle. The subtext. President Biden is asking voters to keep him in the White House until age 86, renewing attention to an issue that polls show troubles most Americans. It's a very soft push forward on the front of Joe Biden's got problems. There was the time last winter when President Biden was awakened at 3 a.m. while on a trip to Asia and told a missile had struck Poland, touching off a panic that Russia might have expanded the war in Ukraine to a NATO ally. Within hours, in the middle of the night, President Biden consulted his top advisors, called the president of Poland and the NATO Secretary General, and gathered fellow world leaders to deal with the crisis. And then there was a time a few weeks ago when the president was hosting children for Take Your Child to Work Day and became mixed up as he tried to list his grandchildren. So let me see. I got one in New York, 2 in Philadelphia, or is it 3? No, 3, because I got one granddaughter who is. I don't know. You're confusing me. He also drew a blank when asked the last country he'd visited in the name of a favorite movie. The two Joe Bidens exist in the same octogenarian president, sharp and wise at critical moments, the product of decades of seasoning, able to rise to the occasion even in the dead of night to confront a dangerous world, yet a little slower, a little softer, a little harder of hearing, a little more tentative in his walk, a little more prone to occasional lapses of memory in ways that feel familiar to anyone who's reached their 9th decade, or as a parent who has. This is a real problem for the Democrats, and it's not going to get better. He's not going to get any younger. Look at the Republican field. So let me play you this audio. This is Dan Balls, political prognosticator who's on ABC, makes a point here you need to hear.
And Dan, of course, whatever message the White House wants to give out, and having the president in the Oval Office this week, we saw an image that stayed with a lot of people, and that is the president falling down after that Air Force commencement speech. How does that play? We talk about this every week, that voters are legitimately concerned about President Biden's age.
Two things, Martha. One is we know that most Americans have no enthusiasm for a rematch between the former president and the current president. That's point one. But it doesn't mean that if that is the rematch, that people will not, in a sense, take traditional sides, that they will move to the red camp and the blue camp. Age is certainly a factor for both men, but more so for the president because he's older and because he has shown some signs of that aging. But I think in the end, people will not necessarily make their decision on that. They're going to make their decision on what each candidate who's the nominee is offering the country and the arguments between the two about the dangers of the other becoming president. And I think ultimately we get down to that in the final stage. But as the president has said, age is an important issue and voters should be thinking about that.
Let's step back for just a moment on this one. You have an octogenarian who will be running, if Donald Trump is the nominee, against an octogenarian, two old dudes running for president, who most of the country actually doesn't want. Now, the partisans, the hardcore Democratic partisans, they're with Joe Biden. A lot of the hardcore Republican partisans are with Donald Trump. And it's an emotional issue. The Democrats think they need Biden to stop Trump. The Trump supporters think they need Trump to stop Biden, even though he didn't last time, but they claim it was stolen from him, whether it was or not. But what about everybody else? You've got Ron DeSantis in his 40s. You've got Tim Scott, I think, in his 40s. Nikki Haley in her early 50s. You've got, how old is Mike Pence? Mike Pence is he's 63 years old. Nikki Haley is 51. Tim Scott is 57. Okay, so Tim Scott's older than Nikki Haley. Born in 65. Y'all, Ron DeSantis is 44. Whether you pick Pence or Haley or Scott or DeSantis or any of these others, who is this guy? Doug Burgum is 66. Chris Christie's getting in. Chris Christie's 60 years old. Asa Hutchinson, age. He's 72, so you'd have the old guy there. He'd be the oldest after Trump. Trump will be 77, 78 years old next year. Y'all, come on. It's remarkable that literally any Republican, including Donald Trump, is younger than Joe Biden. The public, the general American public, not the hardcore supporters, not the hardcore partisans, but the public generally, the people in the middle, they do not want a Trump-Biden rematch. They want someone else. They're begging for someone else. They want anybody else. You offer them, Republicans, anybody else, your chances of winning go up considerably. But there's an emotional side of it too. There's an emotional part of this. There is the grudge match, the 2020 grudge match, the thinking we've got to redo the grudge match of 2020. Was it really stolen? Will they try to steal it again? Do we have a better shot out of it? You got to understand the emotional side of that. But there's also the reasonable side of it, the reasoning side of it, the logic side of it. You have the American public who have literally been banging their head against the wall for a couple of years now saying, give us someone new. And you, the Republican Party of America, have all of these candidates under the age of 60, under the age of 65, under the age of 70. But literally under the age of 60, you got all these candidates. You could give them and provide them. You've said you wanted somebody new. Hey, look. You've got the combat veteran. You've got the woman who's descended from Indians. You've got the man descended from slaves. They're all under the age of 60, a really good, diverse group of people. Meanwhile, you got Joe Biden, who gets lost wandering the White House. His age is a big issue. And he's doing things, telling jokes and the like, trying to mitigate it, but it's still a big issue. But there's another issue. And this issue trumps that issue. No pun intended. There's a recession coming. There's a recession coming. I don't know when it's going to hit. Later this year. The economy is going to slow. Interest rates continue to rise. The economy is going to slow. Businesses are already preparing for it. They're already warning that it's coming. And Joe Biden continues to be pushed further and further to the left. Culturally, on cultural issues, he's out to lunch. You know, the mind-numbing thing to me, you had Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump this weekend essentially try to declare a truce on trans issues. At a time that non-white voters are moving more and more to the GOP on these issues, you got Trump and Ramaswamy's like, nah, we're kind of over it. Boys want to be in girl sports, okay. Let the states decide. That's kind of weird pivot. Ramaswamy came out and said if he would not ban trans soldiers. You've got Biden on these cultural issues going hard left, but Biden economically is going hard left as well. And that's part of the problem. The hard left economic platform got us to the point of inflation. Here's Joe Manchin, of all people, warning about this.
It's notable that you're not ready to sign off that Joe Biden's been moving to the middle. You don't buy it?
Well, this here, I think Joe Biden, that's his inherent who he is. He's been pushed to the far left, and that far left is not basically where the country is. And the far right is not where the country is. Coming back to the middle, then we can continue to bring people to the middle and do our job.
Joe Biden being pushed to the far left, according to people like Joe Manchin. It's hurting him economically. It's hurting him on environmental issues. It's hurting him on cultural issues. And at his age, he's being let around and let off stage. The Republicans have an opening if they're willing to take it. The New York Times now devoting pages to the idea that Joe Biden is old and that elderly statesman is becoming a liability. And the whispers behind the scenes, Gavin Newsom would love to get in. Kamala Harris would love to do it. Pete Buttigieg would die to be president of the United States. He'd kill for it. And they're looking at the old man tripping over sandbags. And they're thinking, Joe, is your time up? Polling suggests it is. But here's the problem for the Democrats. It's not easy to push out the incumbent, but it's incredibly easy for the GOP to do it if they're willing to make a rational, reasonable decision on the new face of the GOP.